think it's going to go a certain way, but actually once you start it and it all falls apart and you have to change on the fly, and you still got to get it done.
And if we're nervous or upset about anything, he's the perfect person to be there with you.
They smiled on screen, mending broken heirlooms that brought families to tears with every restoration. But Suzie and Steve Fletcher, the beloved siblings of the repair shop, had a secret that spanned decades. While audiences admired their skill, few imagined the silent battles they faced beyond the barn doors. Now, the Fletchers are ready to open up, and fans are stunned. We are about to unfold their untold story, a journey through childhood pain, lifelong silence, and a final decision to break it all open. For over a decade, millions of viewers around the world found solace in the gentle rhythm of the repair shop, the soft scrape of sandpaper against weathered wood, the reassuring tick of a freshly serviced clock, and the bittersweet tears of families reunited with lost heirlooms. Together, these moments created a sanctuary of warmth and tradition. Central to this comforting atmosphere were Suzie and Steve Fletcher, siblings whose hands seemed touched by a rare kind of magic. Suzie, with her delicate touch and serene demeanor, embodied the timeless qualities of patience and care. Steve, meticulous and quiet, balanced her energy with a steady calm. Together, they were the beating heart of the workshop, anchors in a sea of nostalgia and restoration. To the public, they were not just skilled artisans, but symbols of enduring strength, steadfast loyalty, and deep-rooted heritage. Their shared laughter, subtle glances, and the way they complemented each other's strengths was like a dance of kinship, almost perfect in its harmony. Yet behind those warm smiles and gentle hands lay a story carefully tucked away. A story stitched with pain, resilience, and secrets kept from the cameras. A truth neither framed by the workshop's vintage walls nor revealed to the glint of polished silver. Fans sensed something beneath the surface. A flicker of sadness in Suzie's eyes when a piece reminded her of lost moments. A brief hesitation in Steve's steady hands when the conversation drifted too close to home. These nuances whispered a hidden chapter, but no one could have guessed how deep the shadows ran. Shadows beneath the workshop shaped Suzie Fletcher's life in ways viewers never fully saw. Behind her poised smile was a past etched with quiet endurance. Raised amidst the rugged beauty of Colorado's sprawling ranchlands, Suzie grew up learning the meaning of hard work, responsibility, and silent sacrifice. The landscape was vast, untamed, and occasionally unforgiving, much like the challenges she faced. Her marriage, once full of promise, eventually became a chapter marked by hardship. The man she loved became a source of pain she rarely spoke about, even to those closest to her. The union was shadowed by control, bruises hidden beneath the fabric of everyday life, and moments where fear replaced love. Despite the weight she bore, Suzie's resolve never faltered. She transformed pain into purpose, channeling her strength into every piece she restored and every story she helped preserve. Yet beneath the surface, scars lingered, visible to no one but her. Steve Fletcher, her brother and co-star, was a quiet guardian of their shared history. His world revolved around the intricate gears and delicate springs of antique watches and clocks. His craft was an outward expression of the precision he craved in life. But beneath the rhythmic ticking of timepieces was a man guarding his own emotional wounds. Steve's calm demeanor was a mask. Behind the scenes, he carried the burden of protecting his sister, managing family tensions, and maintaining the workshop as a haven for both their souls. His steady hands did more than repair objects. They mended fragile hearts, including his own. Together, Suzie and Steve presented a united front to the world. Their camaraderie, sometimes playful, sometimes solemn, was born of shared survival. Fans believed they glimpsed the full picture through their interactions and interviews, but they hadn't even scratched the surface. What lay beneath was a story that would soon come to light, one that would challenge the comforting narrative and reveal the true strength behind the Fletcher siblings. The house that tried to heal them, a world of contrasts, played a pivotal role. Their childhood home in Oxfordshire was a place of contrasts. On the surface, it was a ramshackle, time-worn house with creaky wooden floors and faded wallpaper that whispered stories of generations past. For siblings filled its rooms with noise, chaos, and laughter, chasing each other through narrow hallways, their hands always crafting or mending something. It was a place that held the warmth of family meals, birthdays marked by homemade cakes, and the scent of freshly brewed tea wafting from the kitchen. To outsiders, it seemed like the picture of a close-knit, loving family. But beneath the smiles and noise, an undercurrent of unspoken pain and fragility ran deep. Their mother struggled in silence with severe postnatal depression, a condition poorly understood at the time, often dismissed or hidden behind closed doors. The joyful cacophony of childhood masked the persistent darkness that loomed over the household. Their mother's world was often shrouded in deep sadness and anxiety, her energy ebbing away like a tide pulling out to sea. Their father, tasked with holding the family together, found the pressure unbearable. He was a man weathered by his own fears and frustrations, a figure who tried to be the rock, but was himself crumbling inside. The mounting tension wore on him until he, too, faced a nervous breakdown, a shattering of facades, exposing raw vulnerability. There were times when the children were quietly shuffled off to relatives' homes, their innocence preserved in safe pockets away from storm. Days were spent navigating a family life where warmth sometimes felt like a carefully maintained mask, a fragile veneer concealing the emotional fractures beneath. Steve Fletcher later reflected on those early years with both candor and compassion. "Our mom suffered dreadfully from postnatal depression," he recalled, his voice heavy with the weight of memory. "It wasn't just sadness. It was a profound isolation, and that pushed Dad over the edge. He just couldn't cope and had a nervous breakdown. It was a dark time for all of us." Suzie, her voice tinged with empathy, added, "Looking back, I feel incredibly sorry for Mom. Back then, nobody really understood how devastating it was. The treatment they offered was crude at best, the kind of things that would be considered barbaric today. She was trapped in a system that didn't know how to help her. Despite the hardship, the siblings' memories of their parents were balanced, marked by both affection and unflinching honesty. We had our problems, like most families," Steve admitted quietly. "But we also had each other. Somehow we got through those times. It didn't define us or hold us back the way you might expect. Their resilience wasn't just luck. It was a quiet strength of a family determined to heal in its own imperfect way." The absent years. As she stepped into her 30s, Suzie made a decision that would change the course of her life. Leaving behind the rolling fields and familiar streets of Oxfordshire, she crossed the Atlantic to start anew in Colorado, USA. To the outside world, it was a bold leap, an exciting adventure, a chance to carve out a fresh identity far from the shadows of a difficult past. But beneath the promise of new beginnings, there was an element of escape. The move was as much about fleeing old ghosts as it was about embracing new opportunities. Colorado's vast landscapes and open skies offered Suzie space to breathe, a reprieve from the closeted struggles of her youth. In America, she found love, or so it seemed at first. Rob, the man she married, became a central but silent figure in her story. To the many fans who followed her on the repair shop, he remained an enigma, an absence on screen that spoke volumes in its silence. The marriage was never openly discussed, and what happened behind closed doors became a chapter marked by pain and endurance. It was a hidden battle that shaped Suzie into the strong, compassionate woman viewers would come to admire. The trauma she endured in that relationship was profound, but it was a quiet resilience and refusal to be defined by suffering that became her true legacy. Though rarely spoken of, the shadows cast by those years lingered, shaping her worldview, her empathy, and her commitment to healing to the craft and connection she later fostered on the show. Her journey from those difficult, hidden years toward public life and creative fulfillment is a testament to the unyielding human spirit, showing how, even in the darkest chapters, hope and transformation remain possible. The silence was strategic. But what about her brother back in the UK? The silence surrounding Steve Fletcher's life was strategic. His life unfolded largely within the quiet bounds of Oxfordshire, far from the public eye's relentless glare. Though the world saw the cheerful face of the horologist on the repair shop, few understood the weight he carried beneath that calm exterior. Steve was a man of precision, not just with clocks and watches, but also with the boundaries he carefully drew around his private life. Raising 5 children in a close-knit family, Steve cultivated a reputation as a master craftsman whose hands could breathe life back into most battered heirlooms. Yet amidst all his visible success, an unspoken agreement held the family together. This agreement, forged in silence, protected the family from the raw truth that could fracture their world. Suzie Fletcher, equally skilled and revered for her leatherwork and saddle restoration, shared this unspoken pact. She understood, perhaps better than anyone, the cost of exposure. "We were forced to hide this," she admitted quietly in a rare interview, "because families didn't share. Not back then. It wasn't safe to talk about these things." Things that silence was no accident. The silence was no accident. It was survival in a generation where mental health was taboo, and vulnerability was often mistaken for weakness. The Fletchers built their fortress not with bricks or mortar, but with reticence and discretion. Suz's words echoed the unspoken truth that many families of their time shared. Grief and trauma were kept locked away, safe from prying eyes, to protect not just the individuals but the family as a whole. Steve's refusal to leave Oxfordshire, to escape the shadows of past hardships by relocating or changing course, was itself a quiet testament to endurance. His steadfastness was a mirror of resilience, not a man running from pain, but one learning to carry it without breaking. The cameras could never capture the countless hours of silent struggle behind the workshop's doors, moments when hands that fixed old clocks trembled with memories better left untouched. Smiles shown to the world conceal the nights spent wrestling with sorrow and the relentless burden of protecting a family legacy scarred by loss. And so, in the hush between the ticks of the clock, Steve and Suz's silence spoke volumes. It was a language learned and shared in whispered glances and knowing nods, an unbreakable bond forged in the depths of shared pain and fierce love. Cracks in the veneer, but time, like even the most finely tuned mechanisms, reveals imperfections. The veneer of composure and cheerfulness that Steve and Suzie meticulously maintained began to show subtle cracks, visible only to those paying close attention. Suz's noticeable absences from several repair shop episodes didn't go unnoticed by devoted fans. Whispers of concern grew louder, though the reasons remained unspoken. Her once lively and bright presence felt dimmed, as if shadows in the past were quietly creeping into the present. Steve, too, grew more reserved. Interviews became tinged with reflection. The man who once seemed unshakable revealing fleeting glimpses of a deeper story. On podcasts and behind-the-scenes features, hints of memories buried beneath layers of time surfaced. Stories told in fragments, carefully chosen words that raised more questions than answers. Fans, drawn by the authenticity of the Fletchers' craft and warmth, found themselves grappling with the enigma of what lay behind those smiles. The family's collective silence began to feel less like a barrier and more like a plea for understanding, for patience, and for respect to the battles fought in private. What had they endured to become this close? What tragedies and hardships had woven such a tightly knit bond? What truths had they consciously withheld, hidden behind a curtain of resilience and grace? The growing cracks in their public image invited not just curiosity, but empathy. The Fletcher family story was no longer just one of restoration and craftsmanship. It was a human story of survival, endurance, and a quiet heroism of protecting one another through the darkest of times. As the public gaze sharpened, the anticipation mounted. The reveal, when it finally came, would not just be about what was lost or hidden. It would be about the strength found in embracing vulnerability and the courage it takes to finally speak what once could only be whispered. Pain doesn't always wear a mask. This decision to speak was not a sudden reveal. It was a slow unraveling, a decades-long internal negotiation that finally reached its tipping point. For years, Steve and Suzie carried their shared history with silent dignity, a quiet resilience that rarely revealed the storm beneath the surface. They lived their lives in the spotlight of public admiration, especially on the repair shop. Yet behind the scenes, a delicate wall of silence stood firm. Not out of shame, but necessity. The world saw their smiles, their ease in front of the cameras, and their seemingly effortless passion for restoration. But they knew the truth was more complicated. Pain doesn't always wear a clear mask. Sometimes it lurks behind calm eyes and soft-spoken words. Then came the moment when the scales finally tipped. It wasn't a grand announcement or a tabloid expose. It was a podcast interview, intimate, unvarnished, and profoundly human. A few carefully chosen words slipped into the ether, almost hesitant at first, as if testing the waters. The reaction was immediate, but the intention was clear. They were done hiding. Steve spoke first, his voice steady yet laced with the weight of years spent containing the past. "When you grow up with that kind of background, you just carry it quietly," he said, his tone more reflective than resentful. "But eventually, you have to let some of it go. You can't keep carrying everything inside forever. It eats at you." It wasn't a plea for sympathy or a bid for attention. It was a release, a reckoning. The siblings had chosen vulnerability over invisibility. Behind their calm, a revolution had begun, a quiet but unstoppable movement toward truth, healing, and reclamation of self. The hidden chapter. Yet even with that breakthrough, much remained in shadow. What they revealed was only the surface of a much deeper, darker story that had long been buried beneath the smiles and the craftsman's patience. In a rare extended interview, Suzie and Steve peeled back the layers of the past, the ones they had long protected with fierce loyalty and fear. This was not just a tale of grief or hardship. This was survival, raw, unfiltered, and painfully real. Suz's marriage, which the public had only seen in fleeting glimpses, concealed a harrowing journey. Rob, her husband, was a man who had battled pancreatic cancer with a warrior spirit, but the illness brought more than physical decline. It revealed a terrifying transformation of character. What began as subtle changes became unmistakable signs of control and violence. The darkest memory she shared was of being lifted off the ground by her throat, her feet dangling as breath rapidly fled her body. "I honestly thought I was going to die," Suzie confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was choking me, squeezing so hard I thought my airway would close completely. I don't know what stopped him, why he let go, but when he did, I was left gasping, terrified." Her admission hung heavy in the air, a silence that spoke louder than words. It shattered illusions, not just for the audience, but for Suzie herself. "I was profoundly shocked," she reflected, her eyes distant. "I'd always believed it could never happen to me, that kind of violence, that kind of fear. It was for other people, other stories, not mine. He would never hurt me. At least, that's what I told myself until I saw the truth, until I felt his hands around my throat." The transformation of Rob, from a loving partner to someone unpredictable and dangerous, was a cruel twist of fate that only deepened the wound Suzie carried. Yet amidst the pain, her words carried a quiet strength and an unspoken promise to reclaim her life. This hidden chapter was the most difficult to share, but it was necessary, because silence, as they now understood, was a form of captivity. Speaking was freedom. What the fans never knew was that behind the smiles, the shared laughter, and the gentle hands that repaired what was broken, there was a story of unimaginable strength, survival, and the courage to rise from the darkest of times. For years, millions tuned in to watch Suzie and Steve Fletcher work their magic. The cameras captured the meticulous care, the delicate hands bringing history back to life. They saw the polished leather, the gleaming metal, the intricate stitching. But what they didn't see was the quiet resilience beneath it all. The real story wasn't only in the objects, but in the people who restored them. Behind the scenes, Suzie and Steve were survivors in every sense. They carried invisible scars from childhood hardships, from years shadowed by silence and unspoken pain. The laughter shared over restored clock-faced masked nights, spent wrestling with memories that refused to fade. The precise, patient craft of mending worn-out saddles mirrored the painstaking work they had to do on their own fractured pasts. Each heirloom, each antique, wasn't just a project. It was a symbol, a mirror of their own journeys. They understood the weight of something broken, and the hope wrapped up in its repair. For them, restoration transcended skill. It became a language of healing, a silent but powerful act of reclaiming control over what once felt lost. Steve once said, in a rare moment of candor, "We didn't just fix things for others. It became part of our own healing. Bit by bit, as we restored these treasures, we found pieces of ourselves." Suzie, whose gentle demeanor belied a lifetime of hardship, nodded in agreement. "Every stitch I made wasn't just about the leather. It was about putting myself back together, about telling a story I wasn't ready to speak aloud." The show's success had painted them as expert restorers, but never fully captured the depth of their personal battles. They had been forced to hide their pain, to mask their struggles beneath professionalism and smiles, even as the weight of their histories threatened to overwhelm them. Public life demanded a constant performance, a relentless polish that often fell at odds with their internal truths. Yet through it all, their bond, their unbreakable sibling connection, was a lifeline. It was in late-night conversations, in silent understanding, and in the shared commitment to keep moving forward despite the past. Together, they weren't just repairing antiques. They were quietly repairing themselves. When Suzie and Steve Fletcher finally opened the door to their private world, the impact was profound. Viewers who had only seen the skilled hands and calm voices suddenly glimpsed the raw, unfiltered humanity behind the restoration benches. They spoke of abuse that had haunted their childhood years, shadows that stretched far longer than anyone could have guessed, of mental health battles fought in silence, battles they waged even while being in the public eye, and of generational trauma that wrapped around them like a suffocating cloak, inherited from those before them and threatening to pass on yet again. But even amid this darkness, they chose kindness. They chose to keep restoring not just objects, but the spirit of hope and resilience. Their work became a beacon, a testament to the possibility of healing after pain, of rebuilding what once seemed impossible to save. Suzie's revelation was the heart of it all, a truth kept secret for decades, finally shared with unflinching honesty. It was not just a story of survival. It was a call to courage, to breaking silence, and to embracing imperfection as strength. This wasn't just another episode in a beloved series. It was a reckoning, a moment where a veneer of polished restoration gave way to the truth beneath, fragile, beautiful, and undeniably human. For the first time, they weren't just preserving history for others. They were reclaiming their own story, piece by piece, stitch by stitch. They rebuilt their identities alongside the heirlooms they so carefully tended. And in doing so, Suzie and Steve Fletcher taught their audience an unforgettable lesson, that healing can be an act of creation, and that sometimes the greatest restoration is the one we do to ourselves. What's one truth you've kept hidden for too long, and what would it take to finally let it out? Share your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching this video with us. Catch you in the next one.